Folks, y'all know Corsair. You know the brand that makes gaming peripherals, system components, and recently gaming displays. And now they're making a significant entry into the gaming laptop market. You heard that right, a Corsair gaming laptop. And this is what it looks like. They call it the Voyager a1600. I mean, they are trying something new and different, and I think it's awesome to see Corsair stirring up the pot once in a while with some extra flavors that could be beneficial for a creator, a gamer, or streamer at the same time. But is it any good? Let's find out. The a1600 is all about packing high performance into a slim form factor. Plus, they've integrated some cool features like built-in SlipStream that communicates seamlessly with their gaming peripherals, a custom Stream Deck macro bar that can be mapped to any command of your choice, along with a center display to showcase some metrics, an insanely large trackpad, and low-profile mechanical key switches. And finally, the AMD treatment. This is an AMD Advantage exclusive edition, so you get a Ryzen CPU and a Radeon GPU. Now, we've been testing this laptop for a while, and we have some thoughts about it. So sit tight, because this one's gonna be a long one. Maybe grab a snack or a cup of coffee, and let's just power through this, guys. So first things first, how much does this thing cost? Well, the base model goes for $2,700 US, and for that, you get a Ryzen 7 6800HS processor with 8 cores and 16 threads, 16 gigabytes of RAM and 4,800 megahertz, a terabyte of storage, Radeon RX 6800M GPU, and a 16-inch Quad HD plus 240Hz IPS display. The spec that we have over here costs around $3,000, and that bumps the CPU to a Ryzen 9 6900HS with twice the memory and storage. That's a lot of money to invest in a laptop from a company that has no experience in the market. I also believe that it's slightly overpriced because with these specs, you can find laptops with a 3070 Ti for almost $1,000 less. I'm referring to something like the Legion 5i Pro, which in my opinion is still one of the best gaming laptops that you can buy for the money. So Corsair's really got a lot to prove here, and we're gonna put it up against some of the high performance gaming laptops that we've tested here in the studio. So stick around for the performance results. Now, from the outside, there's nothing really interesting happening with the design on the Voyager. It's an all matte black chassis that's constructed out of aluminum and magnesium alloy materials with Corsair's logo etched at the top. Everything is put together really well, and that's exactly what you'd expect for a laptop that costs almost 3 Gs. But I will warn you that this laptop loves to have an affair with your fingerprints, so you'll have to keep it clean every now and then. The hinge is smooth and pretty strong to hold that massive 16-inch display. It does exhibit a little bit of wobbling, but nothing to worrying levels when you use this thing on your lap. I do appreciate the fact that you can simply open the lid with one hand. Corsair, you nailed that part. As for size, this is a really big laptop, but it's not bulky. The Z height is about 0.78 inches or 19.8 millimeters, which is identical to something like the Razer Blade 17, but it's thinner than the Legion 5i Pro. My only issue with this form factor is the massive depth, coming at around 11.28 inches, which is over an inch thicker or wider than the Blade 17 and the Legion laptop. And that makes it extremely challenging to accommodate this thing inside a backpack. Both Mike and I have been having issues with that. You might be lucky with a massive messenger bag, but again, this is something to take note of if you plan to carry this thing around. The weight isn't all that bad either. It's about 5.3 pounds, which is a healthy number for a laptop in this form factor. The Voyager charges over a standard barrel style connector that has an LED O-ring, and the size of the power brick is not too bulky. It's a 230 watt adapter, and it's not a supersized monster like what comes with the Legion 5i Pro. If you have a GAN charger, you can actually top up the battery over USB Type-C, but keep in mind that there's a 100 watt cap, so the CPU and GPU would behave with respect to those power requirements.
The all-new H7? What's not to like? It's like a perfectly tuned guitar or a sharpened knife, keeping the user happy and your hardware safe. The best part is the redesigned interior that is full of potential with 360 route support at the top and front, including 140mm mounts, a totally new cable management system and cable bar with of course vertical GPU support with this Gen 4 PCIe riser kit. The 3K styles are made to suit your needs, with the Flow being my favorite. I think this is the way to full tower your next build. Check out the new H7 when your heart desires.
All right, so the interior space for the most part is a simple layout. One of the key features of the Voyager is the customizable S-key macro bar at the top. Essentially, it consists of 10 capacitor buttons along with a small LCD display in the middle that can cycle between your laptop's battery life, time, CPU clock speeds, and you can showcase any image that you'd like, and that's about it. Now, the S buttons can be customized to Corsair's IQ software or Elgato's Stream Deck app. Now here, you can create different profiles and then map each button to certain commands like starting a stream using Twitch Studio, opening a website, launching IQ, or even the camera hub to adjust the camera settings for the webcam. You can also assign any hotkey. It's pretty cool, but I think it takes me a while to memorize these commands. There is no visual indicator like what you find with an actual Stream Deck with icons that are quick to recognize. I mean, you could customize the lighting to match your applications, but in reality, I didn't find it that useful. I actually ended up experiencing driver crashes on the tiny screen. It was sometimes unresponsive, which forced me into rebooting the system. Overall, I'm not really sold on this feature, guys, but you might be on the other side of the fence. So let me know what you guys think about this in the comments. Now, the keys themselves feature Cherry MX Ultra low profile switches. It's pretty refreshing to see some mechanical DNA in a gaming laptop, since what you get here is a defined tactile experience with plenty of key travel, but keep in mind that these require a bit more force to actuate compared to something like the Legion 5i Pro. I'm still getting used to it, so there is a little bit of a learning curve that you need to consider. They do feature RGB lighting, and they are backed by Corsair's Capellix LEDs. Also, I should mention that if you turn the lighting completely off, it also disables the S key bar and the tiny display, so there's no way to unlink that, which really sucks. By the way, the power button also doubles as a fingerprint scanner, and I'd had no issues logging into the desktop. The trackpad is massive. In fact, it's bigger than what you'll find on the Blade 17 and most of the gaming laptops. I do prefer this size because I have supersized hands, so it certainly helps me with navigation. The surface is also really smooth with minor resistance, and I didn't notice any cursor acceleration or stuttering, so that's good news. A few other key features that come with this trackpad is that you can disable it by double tapping the top left-hand corner. Now, if you do the same thing on the top right-hand side, it disables the trackpad in half, meaning this side over here turns itself into a dead zone. Port setup on the Voyager is pretty respectable. You get a Kensington lock, power in, 2 USB 4 Type-C ports with support for DisplayPort pass-through and power delivery, and an audio jack. Switching over to the right, you get a full-size SD card reader, a Type-C 3.2 Gen 2 port, and a Type-A 3.2 Gen 1 port. Keep in mind that this is a UHS 1 card reader, so the performance is going to be capped if you use UHS 2 cards like I do, so if you're a creator, that really sucks. Now, if you're really invested into Corsair's ecosystem, say you have a pair of wireless headphones or a wireless mouse or a keyboard from Corsair that supports SlipStream, you won't necessarily need the USB dongle to pair the laptop since it's already integrated with the laptop. Now, Corsair does state that you can pair up to 3 devices simultaneously, so I decided to pair the Virtuoso XD wireless headset, Sabre RGB mouse, and the K70 Pro Mini. The process was actually a little bit challenging. Essentially, you needed to connect these devices at the same time over a USB cable for the pairing process. Now, given that this laptop only has one USB Type-A port, I had to fetch around for a Type-A to Type-C adapter here in the studio to get this thing working. Once the pairing process was complete, the headset worked like a charm, but the keyboard and mouse did not, even though IQ showed that they were connected. I tried to reboot the system multiple times, repaired the devices individually, but I was completely out of luck. So I believe that it's an incompatibility issue with certain hardware from Corsair that supports SlipStream. I think they have to update their documentation, so just be aware of that. This is what the webcam looks like on the Voyager a1600. Now, Corsair does mention that it's using state-of-the-art 1080p sensor that's tuned by Elgato, but in reality, it's not as accurate. As you can see, my skin tones are completely purple. It's not super accurate. And the other thing I noticed that it does tend to auto-expose or play around with the exposure every now and then. It is a 1080p sensor, so detail-wise, it's okay. Now you can use the camera hub to adjust things like brightness, contrast, and color temperature to fine-tune the image to your liking. And the microphone sounds decent. I'm not going to say it's the best that I've heard out there in the market. Also, there is a privacy shutter button that's right over here that simply blocks the webcam, so that's an added bonus for people who value privacy. The speakers are located at the front for better audio projection, but unfortunately, the output is really weak. 100% on this thing sounds like 40% on something like the Razer Blade 17. There's no bass response, and the trebles are somewhat detailed, but it's really not that great. I wouldn't rely on this for entertainment purposes, which includes gaming as well. And from Corsair, I did not expect that. I mean, they produce audio gear as well, so this would have been an excellent opportunity for them to shine, but maybe I had too much expectations, you know? Shifting gears to the display, Corsair opted for a 16-inch Quad HD Plus IPS panel with a refresh rate of 240Hz. I do appreciate the 16:10 aspect ratio so I can view more content, and the color reproduction is pretty good. As you can see, it covers 99% sRGB, 75% Adobe RGB, and 77% P3. I've certainly seen other panels with wider color gamut, but this one gets a job done for casual creators. As for brightness levels, it's average. Our sample was able to sustain a peak brightness level of around 363 nits, which is almost half of what you get with the Legion 5i Pro, but you gotta realize that the 5i has a 165Hz refresh rate. Anything higher is gonna result in lower brightness levels. But needless to say, I had a great time gaming on this display, guys. 16 inches of 240Hz goodness is absolutely amazing. That paired with the 3-millisecond response time is a game changer for FPS titles. Now, Corsair has been pretty generous with upgradability on the Voyager. As you can see, you have instant access to 2 RAM modules. Maximum supported memory is 32GB. The primary NVMe SSD is right over here, and the drive speeds are on par with other high-performance gaming laptops with Gen 4 drives. We got around 6.6GB per second on read and around 5GB per second on write. They've also included an extra M.2 slot for storage expansion. Now, at this point, we jump right into performance, but I need to have a very honest and open discussion about a bunch of problems we've run into when testing the A1600. Now, usually you won't see anything like this in our other laptop reviews because, well, running through the test usually goes without any major hiccups and the user experience ends up being pretty good. The A1600, on the other hand, well, that's not really the case. And I feel a lot of that blame has to be pointed towards AMD drivers. Let me explain. The first big one is a 3 to 5 second system lockup whenever you open any, and I mean any application that uses the GPU. It doesn't matter if it's a game, a video transcoder, or even a media player that uses GPU acceleration. What's happening is AMD Smart Access graphics swapping the display signal from the integrated graphics to the discrete card, but it takes way too long when you compare it to something like Advanced Optimus, which is really seamless. There are also a massive number of error message pop-ups like this one that's claiming that there's a DX9 app open when there isn't, or this fun little one saying Smart Access graphics failed because there's an external display connected, which there wasn't. Now, the only workaround we found to this was to go into the BIOS, disable the IGP, and run purely on the discrete card. But that completely invalidates AMD's SmartShift technologies, which are, like, you know, the things you're actually buying an Advantage Edition laptop for in the first place. Overall, because of the GPU switching throwing out a system lock and another short pause after exiting any accelerated app, the whole system feels sort of sluggish. And look, that's not something that you want to feel when spending $3,000 on a high-end laptop with top-level specs. And speaking of top-level specs, the way Corsair's A1600 behaves is pretty interesting too. Right away, there's a trend here with very consistent power delivery in both extreme and balanced modes. Extreme settles down to about 62 watts, while balanced got to about 54 watts. Quiet, meanwhile, well, that's a bit less consistent since it's designed to deliver good performance in short bursts, but in longer tests, it defaults to the quietest fan mode possible. You can see the effect of additional power on clock speeds too, with balanced and extreme getting very consistent frequencies. Now, these even beat the Zephyrus G14, but I guess that's to be expected since the A1600 is larger and it's got a better cooling system as well. But that cooling system does get a bit overwhelmed where extreme pushes right up against AMD's maximum temperature of 95 degrees, and even performance mode eventually gets there too. Personally, that's not something that I want to see from any laptop, guys. Now, all of that leads to a pretty interesting noise profile because in extreme mode, the fans ramp up to full speed as the system tries to keep the CPU and GPU from throttling. And that means it gets pretty loud at around 54 decibels, but on the other hand, balance is surprisingly quiet, all things considered. And of course, quiet mode is, well, it's almost silent. Now, I really have to hand it to Corsair's engineers when it comes to surface heat management because it's really well done in every single mode. The primary typing zones stay cool and all the hot air is pushed out to the back, and so it's not blasting right at your mouse hand or up into the screen. Honestly, this is probably one of the best results I've seen from a gaming laptop. So I guess that leads us into performance results, but there's a way that Corsair wants other companies to test their laptops, and there's the way our methodology works. Of course, every company wants us to test in the highest possible performance mode to get the absolute best results, but that always leads to noise levels that are, well, unlivable. for a human being. So for the last 2 years, we've been using a 50 decibel cutoff for testing. That means we don't use any performance or fan mode that runs laptops above 50 decibels. Now this obviously limits the performance, but it also rewards the best of the best laptops that can run at the highest possible speeds without blasting out your ears. In the A1600's case, Corsair says again and again that it should be tested in extreme mode, but its 54 decibel noise output was way above our cutoff. But balance mode is just below that, so that's what we're running here. And right away, there's some odd stuff going on over here. Even though the Voyager beats the G14 in single-core results, multi-core has the Zephyrs pulling a bit ahead, even though its 6900 HS is running at a bit lower average wattage. The same goes for the shorter blended test, and what this points to is the G14 running at higher speeds for a short period of time, after which it settles to a bit lower frequency. That means as we move on to our longer testing like Cinebench R23, the A1600 stays in front, but it still struggles to keep up with most of the other laptops rocking Intel's Alder Lake processors. And don't make any mistake about it, guys, because these results aren't anything to be proud of when you consider the $3,000 price tag, other than the Blade 15, which underperforms like crazy with the 12900H. Every other laptop here is less expensive, sometimes even a whole lot cheaper for something like the G14 or the Legion 5i Pro. GPU acceleration doesn't really save things either, since the NVIDIA cards along with Intel's QuickSync acceleration walk all over the RX 6800M and the Ryzen 6900HS combo. The only thing it can effectively beat is, you guessed it, the Zephyr's G14. The next top here is battery life. And yeah, this might take a bit longer to get into, but let me set the stage over here a bit. Over the last 3 years, AMD's mobile CPUs have been battery life champs, and Smart Access graphics built into the Voyager is supposed to improve that even more, while also giving you more performance. That seems like a win-win situation, right? Well, that's where reality kicks in, folks, because despite having one of the biggest batteries on the block, the A1600 has the worst battery life of any AMD laptop we've tested this year. I mean, it's still a decent result compared to most Intel-based systems, but it still isn't anywhere close to what we've come to expect. And after looking into things a bit more, it seems like AMD's so-called smart technologies is actually preventing the CPU or GPU from going into their full idle mode. I just don't know what to say, guys. It's really frustrating. But to be fair, Corsair and AMD have promised BIOS updates and driver revisions soon, so I really hope they get it fixed. Now you can see part of this platform's efficiency when switching into higher loads, because here the A1600 gets one of the best results. So the potential is definitely there. It's just being messed up by drivers. Now, what about the GPU and gaming? Well, the RX 6800M is rated to run up to 120 watts if AMD's SmartShift Matte technology decides that there is enough power headroom between it and the CPU. But that doesn't really happen, since the only mode that it gets anywhere close to 120 watts is extreme. The other settles around 77 watts for performance and 56 in quiet. What that points towards is the CPU gobbling up a bit more of the total power than Corsair might have expected. But there's something else going on here too. Check out these clock speeds. Because the RX 6800M looks like a bit of a dog here unless it's running in extreme mode, I mean, in balance mode, it's guzzling back 77 watts and only running along at 1.1 GHz, which is way lower than AMD's game frequency of 2.3 GHz. To put that into perspective, the 6800S in the G14 needed 70 watts to hit 1.8 GHz. So something's definitely not right here, at least in this game. Now, the GPU acts like it should in extreme, but it's completely kneecapped and balanced. If you look at temperatures, well, they all stick to below 80 degrees, which is good since that's the point where the RX 6000 S series mobile parts are set to start thermal throttling. But extreme does push things to that temperature point by the 9-minute mark, which is something to take into account. Okay, so that's the way the graphics card behaves. So I guess it's time to move into performance. And it wasn't really a smooth experience there either, guys. On one hand, when AMD's smart technologies work, they work really well, especially in AMD-sponsored games. But overall, the Voyager's performance is pretty much all over the place. Sometimes it's in the middle of the pack, sometimes it even trails the G14, while in others, it's way out in front. But luckily, it looks like those low clock speeds I talked about might have been a fluke in one game. But there's one odd thing that happened in Rainbow Six. At first, we didn't understand why the A1600's results were so high. I mean, to a point where something looked wrong. Anyways, it turns out that for whatever reason, the game's rendering scale kept resetting itself to some ultra low resolutions, At first, it looked like the right setting was applied. We loaded our test, opened the settings again, and boom, right back to square one. Now, to make sure it wasn't a game update problem or something, I reloaded the game onto a bunch of other laptops, but none of the others had this problem. So, driver issue? Maybe, but either way, I'm gonna have to give the A1600 a fail here, since there was absolutely no way to run the test properly. Moving to high resolution shows a different situation, and one that feels a lot better for Corsair. It looks like when the CPU becomes less of a bottleneck, the 6800M is able to stretch its legs a bit more, reserve additional power through Smart Shift, and deliver a lot more consistent results. Some of the numbers still aren't the greatest, especially for a $3,000 laptop, but overall, there's less to worry about when running at native resolution. But Rainbow Six is still a fail. So anyways, all of those benchmarks were done with the Voyager in balanced mode, and everything else set to the out-of-the-box defaults like we do with every other laptop. But there are a few more things that I wanted to test, because Corsair offers a lot more here, and some of it's hidden too. For example, in the BIOS, there's an option to run the laptop in full discrete mode, which is a way to bypass all the problems we had with freezing and sluggishness. The only problem is that you'd also eliminate the power savings Smart Access graphics is supposed to give you. Then of course there's extreme mode. Now I'm going to cut Corsair some slack here and see what happens when we compare all of those three options at the A1600's native resolution. So that would be the out-of-the-box balanced mode versus extreme mode versus balanced mode with discrete graphics switched on through the BIOS. So these are some interesting results, aren't they? In CPU-limited games like CSGO, setting the BIOS to discrete GPU only has some serious benefits, but in all other situations, you should just stick to the normal out-of-the-box settings unless you want to get rid of those annoying system hangs. And if you look at extreme mode, well, that's obviously the way to go if you're willing to go balls to the wall while sacrificing your hearing and the Voyager's temperatures. It can actually deliver a pretty big performance uplift right across the board. So from a performance standpoint, the A1600 is good, but I'll say the same thing that I said before. It's not what we'd expect paying $3 grand in such a competitive market. The word here is consistency, and that's something that this laptop lacks. But benchmarks aren't everything either. We also have to remember that laptops need a overall good user experience, since you'll be interacting with it on a regular basis. And that's why we don't just open one of these things up or run some benchmarks and then call it a day. We actually use them for as long as possible, and right now, because of some very real issues with Smart Shift features and some of Corsair's even own features, the user experience just isn't all that great. To be fair, Corsair and AMD are aware of these hiccups, and they've confirmed that they exist, and drivers and BIOS fixes are in the works. But how long will they take to roll out? We don't know. Will they fix all the issues before the A1600 ships to buyers? Probably not, but I'll keep my fingers crossed. Remember, never buy a product based on future software updates. You see, the Corsair Voyager a1600 is an interesting device, and that's about it. It just feels like a $3,000 beta testing platform for a bunch of technologies that aren't ready for prime time yet. On that note, thank you so much for watching. I hope you were able to take away everything that you needed to know about the new Corsair Voyager a1600. I was really excited about this laptop, guys. I'm willing to give them another shot if they promise to fix all the issues that we discussed. So yeah, let us know what you guys think. I'm Ibo with hardwarecanucks. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Spend responsibly, my friends. I hope you finish your coffee or snack, but I feel like I need a coffee and snack right now after recording for an hour and 30 minutes. Okay.